Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life when one voice can echo louder than a crowd. One voice can lift a spirit that's been crushed, spark a dream that's been buried, and ignite a fire that refuses to die. One voice can change everything, and that voice might be yours. You see, every movement in history, every breakthrough in humanity, every transformation in someone's life began with one voice, not an army, not a stadium, just one. Someone who dared to speak up when silence seemed safer. Someone who chose courage when fear was convenient. Someone who refused to let their circumstances define their destiny. That voice doesn't always come from someone powerful or famous. Sometimes it comes from a teacher who tells a child, "I believe in you." Sometimes it comes from a friend who says, "Don't give up." And sometimes it comes from deep within ourselves when we finally decide, "I am more than my past, more than my pain, more than my excuses." The truth is, we are all walking with a voice inside us that has the power to shift atmospheres, to inspire nations, and to change lives, including our own. But too often that voice is silenced by doubt, by fear, by the opinions of others. You have to make a decision today. Will you silence your voice? Or will you release it? Will you let the world tell you who you are? Or will you declare with your voice who you were meant to be? The world doesn't need more noise. It needs truth. It needs courage. It needs the sound of one authentic voice. That voice can be the difference between someone giving up or holding on. That voice can be the difference between an ordinary life and a life of significance. And here's the secret. That voice doesn't just change others. It changes you. Every time you speak your truth, every time you stand in courage, every time you use your voice, you grow stronger, bolder, and freer. So I ask you today, what will you do with your voice? Will you hide it? Or will you use it to change the world, starting with yourself? Because one voice, your voice, can change everything. There are times in life when everything looks settled, when the outcome seems final, and when the future feels already written. But then one voice enters the picture, a voice that challenges the status quo, a voice that says, "It doesn't have to end this way." And suddenly, what looked impossible begins to open up. That one voice can redirect a life, rewrite a story, and reshape a destiny. Think about it. Every great achievement in history, every movement that changed nations, started with a single voice that refused to stay silent. That voice didn't come after the victory. It came before it, when there was still resistance, still doubt, still opposition. It was one voice that lit the torch in the darkness and dared others to follow. Without that voice, the story would have ended differently. Even in our personal lives, destinies turn on the sound of a single voice. It could be a mentor who looks you in the eye and says, "You are capable of more." It could be a parent whispering encouragement when the world calls you a failure. It could even be your own voice spoken into the mirror, reminding yourself that you are not done yet. That one moment of belief, spoken with conviction, can alter the entire direction of a life. The power of one voice lies in its ability to awaken what is sleeping inside. Sometimes people are not lacking potential. They are lacking permission to believe. And when a voice comes along that gives them that permission, when it calls out the greatness that's been hiding inside, something awakens, a dormant dream stirs, a buried hope rises, a destiny begins to unfold. But here's the key. The voice doesn't have to be loud, dramatic, or famous. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and personal. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers at the right moment. Yet even in that whisper, it carries enough power to set a new course for someone's future. One voice, spoken with courage and sincerity, has more strength than 1,000 voices filled with doubt. So when we talk about destiny, don't imagine it as something locked away, unreachable, untouchable. Imagine it as something waiting, waiting for a sound, waiting for a declaration, waiting for a voice that dares to call it forth. That is the power of one voice. It doesn't just speak into the present, it speaks into the future and shifts everything that follows. When you look back at the great turning points in history, you'll notice a pattern. It never began with a crowd. It never started with everyone agreeing. It always started with one person, one voice daring to speak a new truth when everyone else was silent. That voice stood out, not because it was popular, but because it carried conviction. And conviction has a sound that echoes through time. Think about the reformers, the inventors, the leaders who shaped the world we live in today. Before they became celebrated figures, they were just individuals with an idea that others dismissed. People told them, it will never work. Nobody will listen. That's impossible. Yet they spoke anyway. They wrote, they taught, they protested, they invented. That first step wasn't met with applause, it was met with resistance. But their voice planted the seed of change. One voice has the ability to awaken courage in others. Once a person stands up and speaks, it gives permission for others to do the same. History shows us that movements are never born from silence. They are born when one person breaks the silence. That's when a ripple effect begins. A single statement of truth becomes an anthem becomes a movement, and a movement becomes a new chapter in history. What makes that single voice so powerful is not volume, but authenticity. People respond to truth when it is spoken from the heart. They may resist it at first. They may even fight against it. But eventually, truth has a way of breaking through the noise. That's why one authentic voice can outlast centuries of lies. It carries a power that is timeless, and history preserves it because it cannot be erased. Sometimes that voice comes at great cost. History is full of men and women who risked rejection, persecution, and even their lives just to say what needed to be said. They understood that silence would keep the world the same, but their voice could make it better. They chose to pay the price, and their courage carved the path that we now walk on today. When you study history closely, you see it's not shaped by the largest armies, the biggest governments, or the wealthiest corporations. It's shaped by voices, voices that spoke when no one else would, voices that believed when no one else did, voices that changed not just their own lives, but the lives of generations to come. That is the undeniable proof that every great change begins with a single voice. We often make the mistake of thinking that only famous people, leaders, or those in positions of power can create change with their voice. But the truth is, history and everyday life are filled with examples of ordinary men and women who chose to speak when it mattered. They didn't have a spotlight, they didn't have a stage, and they didn't have an audience of millions. What they had was courage, the courage to use their voice even when it seemed small. An ordinary person's voice can be extraordinary because it comes from a place of realness. When someone without fame or recognition speaks from the heart, it cuts through all the noise of titles and positions. People listen not because they're told to, but because the message resonates. Authentic voices don't need celebrity, they carry weight on their own. Think about the teachers, mentors, parents, friends, and strangers who have shaped lives by speaking words of encouragement, warning, or hope. They may never be on television or in history books, but they change the world one life at a time. Their courage creates ripples that move through families, communities, and even generations. Fame is temporary, but the impact of a genuine voice endures. The power of an ordinary voice is that it shows others what's possible. When people see someone like them, someone with no special privileges, speaking up, it sparks courage in their own hearts. It says, if they can do it, so can I. That's how movements spread. That's how change begins. Not because a celebrity endorsed it, but because an ordinary person lit the flame that others carried forward. Ordinary voices also carry trust. People connect with someone who has lived the same struggles, walked the same roads, and faced the same hardships. When that person speaks, their words are not theory, they are lived truth. That's why they can touch hearts in ways that polished speeches and public campaigns cannot. Their voice has a human touch that no stage lights can replicate. So never underestimate the power of your own voice simply because you're not famous. Fame does not equal impact. Influence is not reserved for the spotlight. It belongs to anyone willing to speak courageously. Ordinary people, choosing courage at the right moment, have always been the heartbeat of real change. Sometimes all it takes to shift the course of a life is a single sentence spoken at the right time. A word of encouragement can become the seed that grows into confidence, courage, and determination. When someone hears, "I believe in you," it can unlock a part of them that had been hidden by doubt and fear. That voice of belief may sound small in the moment, but its impact can echo for a lifetime. Encouragement is powerful because it speaks to the part of us that longs to be seen. Every person carries dreams and potential within them, but too often those dreams stay buried under criticism or silence. When someone finally speaks words of belief, it's like striking a match in a dark room. Suddenly, what was hidden becomes visible. The flame of hope is lit, and a person begins to see possibilities they never saw before. Think about how many lives have been changed by a teacher who told a student they had potential, a coach who said they could win, or a friend who reminded them not to quit. Those simple voices didn't just create a moment of encouragement, they created a lasting imprint. Years later, people still remember the person who believed in them when no one else did. That belief became a foundation they continued to build on. The beauty of encouragement is that it multiplies. When someone receives a voice of belief, they often pass it on to others. It's like a spark that spreads into a fire. A single person's encouragement can ripple through families, communities, and generations. The voice that says, "You are capable," can set off a chain reaction of courage that reaches far beyond what the speaker could have imagined. And here's the thing, encouragement doesn't require grand speeches or dramatic gestures. It often comes in the form of everyday conversations, small affirmations, or quiet reassurances. A single phrase said sincerely can stay with someone for the rest of their life. That's the power of words spoken with belief. They don't fade easily, they linger, and they shape the way a person sees themselves. When we recognize this truth, we realize that every one of us has the ability to transform lives simply by speaking belief into others. Encouragement doesn't just lift spirits in the moment. It has the power to rewrite stories, rebuild confidence, and set people on a new path. Voices of belief become the turning points in people's lives, sparking transformations that last far beyond the moment they were spoken. Every single person is born with a voice that carries more than just sound. It carries influence. Deep inside, there is a voice that has the ability to breathe life into others, to comfort wounds, and to ignite strength where there was weakness. Too often, we underestimate that inner power, believing that our words don't matter. But the truth is, your voice is not just a tool of communication. It is an instrument of transformation. Your voice can inspire. When you speak from a place of passion and conviction, your words have the ability to awaken dreams in the hearts of others. A simple story, a piece of advice, or even a few words of hope can cause someone to see their future in a new light. People are hungry for inspiration, and sometimes your voice can be the spark that helps them rise above their circumstances. Your voice can also heal. Life wounds people through rejection, failure, loss, and disappointment. But words spoken with compassion and empathy have the ability to soothe pain. When you tell someone, "You are not alone," or "you will get through this." You may be stitching together a heart that was breaking. Healing doesn't always come from medicine or therapy. Sometimes it comes from the right words spoken at the right time. And your voice can empower. Empowerment is more than encouragement. It is equipping someone to believe in their own ability to act. When you say to someone, "You are capable, you are strong, and you have what it takes," you are not just offering comfort. You are handing them courage. Empowering words don't just lift emotions, they fuel action. They create momentum that pushes people to step into their strength. The remarkable part is that this power exists in every single one of us. You don't need a platform, a microphone, or a large audience. You can inspire, heal, and empower the people closest to you. Your family, your friends, your coworkers, even strangers. You never know the weight of your words in someone else's life. What you consider ordinary might be exactly what they needed to hear to keep going. When you begin to recognize that your voice carries this kind of potential, you stop treating your words casually. You begin to realize that every conversation is an opportunity. Every interaction is a chance to speak life instead of negativity, hope instead of doubt, strength instead of fear. That voice within you has been waiting to be used, not just for yourself, but for the people around you who need it most. The most powerful force in the world is not always the loudest. It is often the silence that comes when fear takes over. Fear whispers to us, "What if they laugh? What if you fail? What if you're not good enough?" And that whisper grows so loud that it drowns out our courage. Many voices that could have changed lives never got the chance to be heard, not because they lacked truth or power, but because fear convinced them to stay quiet. Doubt is another silencer working from the inside out. While fear is about the outside world, doubt is the battle we fight within ourselves. It's that small voice that says, "Who am I to speak? Why would anyone listen to me?" Doubt chips away at confidence, making people question the value of their words. And yet, the irony is this: the very people who doubt themselves often carry the messages the world most needs to hear. Then comes criticism. The moment you decide to use your voice, there will always be someone ready to tear it down. Criticism doesn't just come from strangers. It can come from family, friends, or people you respect. And because of that, it cuts deeper. Too many people let criticism silence them forever, mistaking someone else's opinion as proof that their voice doesn't matter. But the truth is, every voice that has ever stood for something faced criticism. It's not a sign you should quit. It's a sign that your words carry weight. The tragedy is not when people experience fear, doubt, or criticism, because everyone does. The tragedy is when those voices become stronger than our own. When we allow fear to write our story, when we let doubt bury our potential, and when we hand over our power to the opinions of critics, we silence the very voice that could change everything. The enemy of impact is not weakness, it's silence. But here's the reality. Fear, doubt, and criticism are not signals to stop. They are signals that you're moving in the right direction. Nobody criticizes silence. Nobody doubts someone who never tries. Nobody fears a voice that stays hidden. The moment you decide to speak, resistance shows up, not to stop you, but to test how badly you want to be heard. That's why every person who discovers their voice must make a decision. Will I let fear silence me? Will I let doubt shrink me? Will I let criticism stop me? Or will I rise above them and use my voice anyway? The greatest silencers are not outside of us, they are within us. And the moment we choose to rise above them, our voice becomes unstoppable.